the president speaking in Mississippi last night. Ryan Nobles from CNN standing by on the line. Up until this point, even Kellyanne Conway out really crediting the president with being so respectful to this woman who claims to be a victim. That, Ryan, ended last night.
Did it ever?
Oh, boy.
Bill, I have to think that we all were just waiting for this to happen. The president rarely can hold a level of restraint for very long, and especially when he gets in front of a riled-up crowd, that tends to be where he lets loose. My colleague Jeff Zeleny was in the room last night, and the way he described it was you could tell he kind of put the first line out there to test the water to see how the crowd responded. The crowd responded the way he wanted him to, and then he just took off from there. I don't see how this helps the situation for him. It's clearly just the president letting off a little steam to a certain point. But, even the guys on Fox News were criticizing this turn in his approach to this. And a couple of days ago, he was calling her credible, saying that she needed to have her voice heard, saying that he supported the FBI investigation. It's an interesting turn and a dramatic one.
Yeah.
And I don't know how this impacts things going forward.
Well, and with the midterms, it certainly excites the opposition.
Well, the other thing it does, there's two things that are we should keep in mind here. You have to keep in mind that the president is really dealing with an audience of about 4 senators. Jeff Flake, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, and then maybe throw in wild card red state Democrat like Joe Manchin or Heidi Heitkamp, somebody like that. So, if you're already on the fence here and you're trying, like if you're Jeff Flake, you probably want to confirm Brett Kavanaugh, but you're uncomfortable with the way that this is all played out. This doesn't help your comfort level at all. That doesn't make you feel better about, standing up for someone like Brett Kavanaugh. So I think that's the problem. But on the other side, you're right. The midterms, there's a chance this fires up both parts of the base. I'm in Florida this morning. I'm covering those races. There's a new poll out this morning that actually shows Ron DeSantis, who's the candidate for governor, who's Trump's guy, narrowing the gap with Andrew Gillum, who's the Democratic nominee, and some Republican strategists are attributing that to the Kavanaugh hearings because it's waking Republicans up. So maybe that's part of the calculus as well. It's kind of disappointing that this whole situation, which is very uncomfortable and it marks a very awful moment in a woman's life, has become about raw politics. But that's where we are in 2018.
Yeah, it is. Let's. There's a lot to get into. Of course, today is the big alert that's going to happen around 2:18. Is that what we're saying?
2:18.
2:18 today. So there'll be 2 different times that it goes off a few minutes later as well. But even that has become a controversy. There's someone suing over this, saying it's an infringement upon our privacy, our rights. Nothing is.
It's seizure of electronic property.
There's nothing that doesn't include controversy today.
No, and I think that's what has so many people disappointed just about everything that is happening in America right now, is that we've all just we continue to retreat back to our corners. And, I always find it so interesting, when we talk about Kavanaugh, these little machinations of this hearing, whether or not someone who is afraid to fly but actually gets on a plane, it seems to be whether or not you think that person is lying.
Yeah,
it has to do with whether or not you're a Republican or a Democrat. Nobody ever just looks at the facts of something and removes their partisan lens from it. And, what you're talking about, I think, is a perfect example of that. And I don't know, it's a distressing time in our country. It always kind of gets like this right before an election, but it seems like now we're in a perpetual election cycle, so people always have their partisan guard up.
I do say that, prior to 2016, and prior to that campaign leading up to the election in 2016, if a president were to have gone off like President Trump went off last night, if a story were to have come out about taxes and the president hadn't exposed his tax situation, and the New York Times does a story about his taxes, saying it wasn't $1 million loan, they cheated the system, and it was hundreds of millions of dollars. And then there's another story that came out. I think Wall Street Journal had another story that the president and his son were actually interfering and trying to stop the porn star from coming forward. If those stories were out prior to 2015, let's say, it would be an upheaval of people would be we wouldn't know what to say. But today, those stories came out. So there's 3 stories that are basically anti-Trump stories out today. And I looked at them the first thing this morning and was like, well, this is just another day in politics.
More noise.
Yeah, and I do believe the noise is becoming white noise. I do think that people just are like, okay, please, enough of this. All right, so he cheated on I think people have come to the conclusion that he did cheat on his taxes, but no one really cares, right?
Well, there's 2 examples that I think perfectly illustrate the point you're making, Bill. Go back to, let's use a Supreme Court nomination because this is similar to what we're dealing with Brett Kavanaugh right now. George W. Bush nominates Harriet Miers, who was his White House counsel, well thought of within the administration. There was no scandal or anything connected with her. There was a very small group of whiny conservatives that didn't like the idea that she was going to be the next Supreme Court justice, and it started a ball of controversy. And before she even got to the hearings, George W. Bush pulled the nomination because he didn't want the controversy, and they put in Sam Alito. That's one example. The second example, I always go back to this, is Mitt Romney during his campaign when he actually did release his tax return. And the controversy was that he only paid 13.5% in his taxes. Still had donated millions to charity. There are all these things. That became an enormous controversy. And there weren't all these Republicans that rushed to his defense like they rushed to Donald Trump's defense. And here you have a story on the front page of the New York Times where they've literally gotten a hold of hundreds of thousands of confidential tax documents that summarily completely undercuts Donald Trump's biggest argument as to why he deserves to be president, that he is a self-made man and a deal maker. Those are the things that attracted a large swath of Americans to his campaign. And what this story lines out in specificity with documents to back it all up was that essentially his father bankrolled the entire thing right up until his father died in the mid-1990s. This isn't as if he gave him a boost in the late 70s and Trump took it from there. They were systematically, transferring his father's wealth, which was massive, to President Trump and his children right up until he died to avoid a huge inheritance tax, and that's basically been the foundation for Donald Trump's fortune. Now, I think it's important to point out, aside from the chance that he violated or at least was on the edges of legality with the tax situation, nobody's begrudging the fact that the president might have used a boost from his father to get where he is today. Millions of people do that. The point is, he's always said it's the opposite, that he took his father's meager fortune and turned it into a massive fortune. And what this story lays out quite clearly was that is not the way it went down.
But at the same time, supporters have to will point to the successes he's having, certainly where the economy is today. And how about this NAFTA deal? Mexico falls in line. Canada's standing firm until they don't. That's a huge victory for President Trump.
Bill, I'm in the middle of Bob Woodward's book right now, and I think it's interesting that the president has been so just summarily dismissing it because there's actually quite a bit of behind-the-scenes stuff in that book that people who support Donald Trump and they support him for that reason of being a disruptor would read it and think, this is kind of why I elected this guy. And it's also kind of to a certain degree frustrating for the president's supporters who see these kind of sideshows with Brett Kavanaugh and Stormy Daniels and some of the other things that he does. Charlottesville's another example, because there are examples of success within this administration, success at levels that other presidents have not been able to do.
Yeah.
And these trade deals are a very good example of that. I mean, when he first started to play tough with NAFTA, a lot of Republicans, Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, they were crying, don't do this. NAFTA's been such a huge success. He did. He basically put it on the line for both Mexico and Canada and said, we're doing this with or without you.
Yeah.
And initially Mexico played hardball and fell in line, and then Canada played hardball and fell in line. I mean, if you read the headlines in Canada, those in opposition to Prime Minister Trudeau are up in arms. The conservatives in Canada are screaming that Canada got screwed on this deal. So, yeah, this is a success for President Trump. And if you support him, this is why you support him.
Yeah.
And then it's an example of he does have skill in this area, but, of course, the sideshow connected with his presidency makes it so frustrating.
All right, I'm going to give Wayne the last opportunity here. Wayne with a question for Ryan. Go ahead, Wayne, you're on the radio.
Okay, Ryan, if all else fails with this Kavanaugh nomination, could Trump, even though he's like whatever independent Republican, can he nominate Hillary Clinton so that they could do a big investigation on her and find out what a schmuck she was?
I'm not sure, Wayne, that's a question, but I appreciate your comment.
Could they do that? Could they nominate her and then turn around and do a big old, investigation into her background and her husband and all that?
We get your point. I'm hanging up. Thank you, Wayne.
Right.
Ryan.
Wayne did not come up with that joke on his own. I saw that all over Twitter yesterday.
Okay, all right, cool, good.
And
the other one,
he delivered it well, though.
Credit for it.
The other was Lindsey Graham saying, if he doesn't make it, I want the president to renominate Kavanaugh. That's what Lindsey Graham was calling for yesterday. So, all right, Ryan, as always, we appreciate it. We'll do it again, and who knows what today will bring? Who knows?
Wait, you got 2 seconds for me, Bill?
I do. Yeah.
Yes, Kitty. I've just launched a podcast this week with CNN. If I
saw
plug
that.
it,
yeah,
it's called The Forecast. I'm doing it with Harry Enton, who's like our whiz kid. He's a poll analyst, really smart guy, and Rebecca Berg, who's one of our great political reporters. Just launched on iTunes this week. We're already in the top 10 news and politics. Go into your favorite podcast app, search for The Forecast, subscribe, leave us a review. I'd really appreciate it if our friends in Utica would listen in. I think it's going to be a great opportunity for you to listen. It's nonpartisan. We're just looking at the issues as they head into the midterms. Yeah.
How about well, we'll look for it. We'll talk about it more next week. But as we head into these midterms, a new poll coming out, AARP has Anthony Brindisi with voters over 50. Brindisi leading by 13 points over Claudia Tenney. And that 50-plus is a big number.
No doubt. They vote in big numbers, All right,
Ryan, thanks so much. We appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.
Great, guys. Take it easy.
Ryan Nobles from CNN.